missionaries need to know that when you go to a place like South Africa, which is so different from what we're used to, like, please, like just be open-minded. And don't just, like, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, you know, just like when in South Africa, just embrace South African culture. A lot of South Africans were really impressed with me because I was able to tell them just basic South African facts that maybe they didn't even know, like about the history or the culture or the language or whatever. And they were like, whoa, how do you know this? You know, so, and that's a great way to just empathize, like endear people. Like the fact that you know something about their country, they appreciate that. Some Americans can come off as being very like arrogant or maybe uncultured, or there's something called the ugly American stereotype, which is, you know, when Americans go around the world, they kind of like, you know, they have this America's the best place mentality, which is, just don't do that. Like, obviously there's things in South Africa that you're going to find that are pretty unattractive, just about the culture or whatever, but, you know, keep those things to yourself. I know that's hard, but, and just remember that these people are good people, and they have had struggles that Americans and other people from the West have never had to deal with. Just be open-minded. Listen more than you talk. That's always a good rule of thumb. Ask people about themselves. Ask people about their culture, about their way of life, how they do things, their history, you know. People like to talk about themselves, and show interest, and like, and tell people, like, man, like people, like when you first get out and you tell people where you're from, a lot of them will be like, oh, how do you like South Africa so far? And I'm sure you could say, well, there are things I don't like about it, but obviously don't say that. Just say like, oh, I love it here. I love this about South Africa. I love this. And people appreciate that. Like one thing that almost everybody loves about South Africa who goes there is the weather. It just has great weather. It's this Mediterranean climate. It's like Southern California. Even during the winter months, it's still pretty warm. I mean, you might need a jacket, but it has some of the best weather in the world. So that's definitely one thing you can, if you have nothing else you want to say, just say you love the weather, because you will love the weather. And it's funny, another thing too, because Africans are kind of self-aware. They kind of understand how other people think of Africa. So when you come to America when you come to Africa as an American, I always found it interesting. A lot of the questions people first asked you was, like a lot of the Africans, they'd be like, oh, when you found out you were going to Africa, did you think you would see lions and giraffes and elephants everywhere? You know, they kind of feel like the rest of the world has this stereotype that in Africa, like as soon as you get off the plane, you're going to see like an elephant there or a lion or whatever. And that's kind of funny, but maybe, like, obviously when we think of Africa, I'm sure that's one of the first things we think of, like non-Africans, just the animals and all the cool exotic animals and things there. So try to get rid of your stereotypes of Africa. Like obviously there are animals there, and I got to see them in like game parks and game reserves, and you'll be able to go to those. But you know, it's not like something you'll see walking down the street or something. Definitely not. And another thing is, like, when we think of Africa, we might think of like have this National Geographic image of just like these people who are super like in this rural area that's like, you know, National Geographic, you know, that like that tribes, and the women have like those big lip like things in their lips, and they're unclothed, like they have their, you know, body exposed, and they're just doing these chants, and it's like a really like almost primitive image. And there are places like that in Africa for sure, and in South Africa, but the vast majority of people obviously don't live that way. They live basically normal lives. They have houses or apartments. You know, they cook their food on a stove. You know, it's like, so just, you know, don't think of them as being all like, you know, wild tribesmen, because that's not true. And you probably won't encounter any people like that. Like obviously you're only gonna be in areas where the church is located, and the church is for the most part only located in major population areas in South Africa. So yeah, so just try to undo your stereotypes.